On the 2nd of July, 1994, at around 3 in the morning, a man walked out of a nightclub in Medellín, Colombia. His name was Andrés Escobar. He was 27 years old, a professional footballer, a World Cup player, and he was about to be shot 6 times in a parking lot. According to eyewitness reports, his killer shouted one word after every bullet: goal, the same word Colombia had celebrated throughout his career. This is not just a football story. This is a story about what happens when the world's most beautiful game becomes entangled with one of the world's most dangerous businesses. And it is the story of a man who genuinely believed football could help save his country. He was wrong, and it cost him everything. To understand what happened to Andrés Escobar, you first need to understand Colombia in 1994, not the Colombia of today. The Colombia of then, Medellín, his hometown, had a murder rate of 380 per 100,000 people. Many of today's most dangerous cities sit around 100. For perspective, in 1993 alone, Medellín averaged more than 10 murders every single day, and behind much of that violence stood powerful drug cartels, organizations that had quietly embedded themselves inside Colombian football. Pablo Escobar, no relation to Andrés, had helped finance Atlético Nacional through cartel money. Other drug lords did the same with other clubs. They weren't subtle about it. Huge sums were wagered on matches through underground betting networks, sometimes tens of millions of dollars. And when results went against them, threats followed. Sometimes those threats became reality. This was the world Andrés Escobar played football in. This was the world the Colombian national team existed in. And yet, out of all that chaos, something extraordinary was beginning to happen. By the early 1990s, Colombia had become one of the most exciting football teams on earth. Carlos Valderrama, Freddy Rincón, Faustino Asprilla. These weren't just talented players. They were artists. Their football was fluid, creative, unpredictable, beautifully chaotic. Then, in September 1993, they stunned the world. They defeated Argentina 5-0 in Buenos Aires, on Argentina's own ground. In a World Cup qualifier, 5 goals. The Argentine press called it one of the darkest nights in their football history. The world took notice. Even Pelé made a prediction. He said Colombia would win the World Cup. Not just qualify, win it. And so Colombia arrived at USA, genuine contenders, and Andrés Escobar arrived with them. He wasn't the superstar. He wasn't the headline maker. He was the defender, the quiet one. His teammates called him El Caballero, the gentleman, not because he lacked toughness, because he carried himself with dignity, because in a country drowning in violence, he played the game with grace. He wrote newspaper columns about football's power to unite people. He genuinely believed the game could help heal his nation. He was that kind of person. Colombia's first match was against Romania. They lost 3-1. Disappointing, but recoverable. Their second match would be against the host nation, the United States. On paper, Colombia should have won. The Americans were ranked 23rd in the world. Colombia were ranked 4th, but before kickoff, something had already gone terribly wrong. Midfielder Gabriel Gomez reportedly received a death threat delivered directly to the team hotel. The message was simple: do not play, or else. The coach even considered resigning. Players were frightened because they weren't just playing football anymore. They were performing under the shadow of violence. Violence from the same networks that funded them, bet on them, and expected them to win. They took the field anyway. 22 minutes into the match, American midfielder John Hark sent a low cross into the penalty area. Andrés Escobar moved to intercept, a routine defensive action, something he had done thousands of times before. But this time, the ball glanced off his left foot and rolled into his own net. Own goal. USA 1, Colombia 0. The Americans eventually won 2-1. Colombia were eliminated. Pelé's prediction was gone. The most promising Colombian generation in football history had collapsed in the group stage, and somewhere in the betting networks, in the cartel circles, and back in Medellín, the money had gone wrong. Some estimates suggested hundreds of millions of dollars had been wagered on Colombia advancing. All of it lost. Someone had to be blamed. When the players returned home, several reportedly went into hiding. They knew what defeat could mean. They had seen it tournament before, coaches received threats. Players disappeared. Some members of the squad were genuinely afraid to come back. Andrés Escobar was different. He did not hide. He walked through the airport, spoke to journalists, and wrote an article for El Tiempo newspaper. In it, he wrote, "Life does not end here. We have to go on." He urged Colombians not to abandon the team. He asked for understanding, for forgiveness, not only for himself, for everyone. 10 days later, he went out with friends in Medellín. They visited a bar and restaurant called El Indio in the Las Vegas district of the city. Around 3 in the morning, an argument broke out in the parking lot. The exact cause remains disputed. But what happened next does not. A man named Humberto Muñoz Castro, a bodyguard and driver connected to the Gallon brothers, pulled out a gun and shot Andrés Escobar 6 times. Witnesses later claimed that after every shot, he shouted the same word, "Goal." At 3:15 a.m., Andrés Escobar was pronounced dead. He was 27 years old. The news shook Colombia. His funeral procession drew more than 120,000 people through the streets of Medellín. 120,000 in a city that had spent years consumed by violence, all gathering to mourn a footballer. The prosecutor later said, "Everyone wanted the crime solved, from the president to the most humble Colombian." Humberto Muñoz Castro was arrested. He confessed. He served only 11 years before being released. The Gallon brothers were later prosecuted as masterminds, but the true motive has never been fully established. Was it gambling losses? A personal dispute? A deliberate execution? No definitive public answer has ever emerged, and that uncertainty is part of what makes this story so haunting, because Andrés Escobar did not die because of one own goal. He died inside an environment that had been built long before that match, long before that parking lot, long before that World Cup. An environment where football had become inseparable from violence. And that is what this story ultimately tells us. In Andrés Escobar's world, the stakes were never just goals, or points, or trophies. The stakes were life itself, and he knew it. They all knew it, yet he played anyway. He wore Colombia's yellow shirt. He went to the World Cup. And he believed that playing beautiful football with dignity still mattered, that it could mean something to a country desperate for hope. Think about that. Not the courage required to play football. The courage required to believe football could still mean something in a nation scarred by violence. In a city where people were dying every day, Andrés Escobar still believed in the game. He may have overestimated what football could fix, but he never misunderstood what football was. And the 120,000 people who lined the streets of Medellín understood that too. They weren't simply mourning a footballer. They were mourning an idea. The idea that in a broken, wounded, brilliant country, a man who played football with grace could still make things better. Colombia eventually returned to the World Cup. In 2014, they reached the quarterfinals. James Rodriguez won the Golden Boot. The country celebrated once again. And in Medellín today, a statue of Andrés Escobar stands proudly, captured mid-stride, running, still wearing the yellow shirt, still playing the game he believed in.